former leaders of the farm of agriculture in Ireland, and we have some big guests here on the couch with us. We have Henry Corbally, the former chairman of Downie, Eddie Downie, the former president of the Irish Farmers Association, the IFA, and John Comer, the former president of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, the ICMSA. Thank you very much for joining us today. Life after farm politics. You all have a huge wealth of knowledge of Irish agriculture, of the issues that farmers face on the ground, and you have huge empathy with them. Is that something that we really need to be tapping into more as a country? Do you think that do you still think that there is more to give? I'll come maybe to Eddie and John first. Life after farm politics in the farm organisations. Is there still a role for that type of knowledge that you've harnessed?
Yeah, I don't think knowledge is an easy burden to carry. And having that, but using it and getting value from it is very important. I think when you see people who've gone through the mill, gone through the system, done all that they can do within it, I think you should always listen to them and talk to them. Now I'm talking about people who I meet on a regular basis who've gone through, former presidents of IFA or whatever. Listen to what they're saying. I think we need, within the agricultural sector and the political system, if you're talking about that in agriculture, you need young people coming through the system on a regular basis. And I think that's probably one of the big areas we've fallen down on over the last number of years.
And John, what about your own personal views? I suppose in years gone by, former farm leaders would have made the leap into mainstream politics. Do you still think that there's a lot to give yourself in the field based on your own wealth of agricultural knowledge?
Yes, indeed, Claire. Yeah, it's a nice feeling on this hand to be retired. A lot more time from farm politics, that is. A lot more time to build up my own farm back up again. To be honest with you, even though I have a great man working with me, farms does get neglected when you're away so much. So I've had the whole summer, got a lot done there. But you would miss the cut and thrust of advocating on behalf of people. And you say about knowledge, it comes with a little bit more older age, and I'm not saying I'm old or anything like that, but you have to live to get experience, and I would have a lot of experiences and collective experience now that you can pass on to young people, and I see a great future for young people, and for the industry, but it needs to be structured, and we need to learn from the experiences of the past and not repeat the mistakes of the future. And I think, unless there's a structure put on it, unless there's people like Henry and Eddie and myself having our 2 pence worth of advice, then there is potential to make mistakes from the past and not to harness the experience and the knowledge that we've gained through trial and error and pitfalls that we might have made ourselves.
Henry, what about yourself, former chairman of Downie? Again, huge knowledge and huge connection with the dairy farming community. Do you think that you still have a very important role that could potentially be harnessed?
Well, maybe that's not for me to answer. Maybe somebody else might think I might have a role or I mightn't. I'm not a great believer in a former leader of any organisation kind of hanging around the organisation after his term has spent, because really and truly the new people who move into an organisation need to put their stamp on it, and sometimes they can be hampered by having the former leader or the ex-president, chairman, whatever you like to call it, still on the books with them. I do think that people in our positions can have different roles maybe in life. We can have more time for ourselves, we can have more time for our family, we can make observational comments maybe from time to time through the media that people may heed or may not. But as for the actual role that you've left, I think it's important that you actually make a clean break and leave, because I think the next people coming along will do a better job without you. And we all like to flatter ourselves to think that we can't be done without, but in reality we can all be done without. What's really important is that when you're in an organisation that you get to make a stamp, that you get to do something real and something positive while you're there. And I would believe that John and Eddie and hopefully myself had the opportunity to do that in our different organisations, and I personally feel that I did have those opportunities. I worked through the farm organisations for a long number of years, representing farmers, and then I moved into the co-op world and got to the top as chairman of Glanbia. And I feel that during that time, I hope that I made some difference. I really strived hard to make a difference for farmers. And from here on in, if there's a role for me, I think that it will be a different role, not the same role again, because I think when you've done it, and you're best out of it.
And I suppose the three of you have stepped away from the main stage at a time where the challenges are enormous. The issues are that they're global issues, between the ongoing challenge of tackling carbon emissions, Brexit, the reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, price volatility. It must be, where do you think farming in Ireland is going at the moment? Where are the areas that you are most concerned that there is serious vulnerabilities, and which areas need to be supported most? Maybe, John, do you want to go there?
Yes, certainly. Well, first of all, I say straight up, there's loads of opportunity for young farmers and for existing farmers in this country. But as I continuously say, we can't just go forward blindly. There has to be a plan, an individual has to have a plan, the member state of Europe has to have a plan, and the European Union has to have a plan. And if any one of those falls short, then we're doomed to failure. So I think it has to be a three-pronged approach. So at farm level, I would be concerned perhaps at the level of debt that's building up at farm level. And that leaves individuals, and it's the individuals that are borrowing. So forget about all the rhetoric and the hype. The individuals have to make sure that they have some sort of a safety net put in place so as they don't leave their family farm vulnerable to takeover. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't grow and expand your business in an incremental, structured way. Absolutely. Because I think there's potential for growth, but we all know the fundamentals of world demand growing and so on and so forth. And Ireland being the most efficient in Europe and potentially the most efficient in the world in terms of litres of milk produced per kilos of carbon produced. So I think there's a great potential there. Nationally, unless the national government steps up and make sure that there's policies in place that's conducive to expansion and agriculture in all provinces, and I might say in the Connacht, Ulster provinces as well, to make sure that we keep people in the countryside, that we keep rural areas thriving, and that we keep a heart in our community. And agriculture can reach into every single parish and every single village in the whole country. It's the only industry that's there. There's nobody else looking to get in. We need a good cooperative base, which I'm glad to say that we have. And then, finally, at European level, European governance has got to step up to the plate. We've got to have a well-funded CAP. We have to be able to explain the Common Agricultural Policy to the citizens. Civil society has got to be informed. And we see what happens if civil society aren't properly informed, and if the value and the benefits of being in the European Union aren't explained to the citizens, then what you have is populism. And the extreme right or the extreme left, one is as bad as the other, can take over and lead people astray. And I think that's what the result was from Brexit. People were misinformed, didn't have the correct information, and they just voted for something that I believe that they were told lies on.
Eddie, can I bring you in there? Eddie, what areas are you watching very closely at the moment?
I think everybody talks about Brexit. First thing they talk about low interest rate loans, they talk about cap reform and all those issues, and the global problems. And the reality here is we need to look after the local issues, the local issues on the ground. We have a number of sectors that are severely under pressure, and you hear a lot about them: the suckler herd, sheep sector, the tillage sector in particular. They are in real trouble, and they're competing with a very vibrant dairy sector after the outcome or the turnout from the removal of the milk quotas. And I think we have a huge problem in that within all of that, and the competition that's taking place there is creating problems on the ground. We've got to find a better cooperative system whereby farmers can work together. And I liked what happened this autumn, where we saw tillage farmers coming together with dairy farmers, with different farmers, in order to make sure there's a decent supply of fodder coming through the system. That type of cooperation and that type of structure, I think we have to develop it and develop it more. I think we have to look at cap reform, and I think we have to really turn it on its head. I think cap reform is failing, and failing badly, in that it's creating a dependent society. There are people out there who are dependent on this payment in order to survive, and it's the catalyst for operating, for getting up in the morning and doing your business every year, rather than the output from your farms. And I think that's critically important, that we change that around and we move that payment towards an output-related system and a productive system.
And Henry, your views on the dairy sector in particular, we're considering now how are we going to meet our production targets and bring down carbon emissions. Where do you see the challenge for the sector?
I think the challenge for farming lies where it has lain probably for the last 50 years, in that efficiencies at farm level have improved year on year. We see farmers, particularly in the poultry and the pig sector, their ability to grow animal protein from grain has improved year on year. This has led to really efficient production, which has led in effect to quite a cheap source of animal protein. This competes with the other forms of production, dairy and beef and whatever. So in reality, the value for the last 50 or 60, 70 years, the value of the litre of milk, the value of the kilo of pork or chicken or beef, it is able to purchase less off-farm stuff than it ever was. And everybody can remember back to when a family could live on 10 or 15 cows, and now that number has moved up. The average dairy farm in Glanbia now is 96 cows. So the efficiencies have brought efficiencies on farm, but in reaction.
We as who are past leaders can hardly be seen as futurologists, but you can judge what might happen in the future from what has happened in the past. So what has happened? The farm sizes have been increased. The amount of production that each farmer has grown immeasurably in our lifetime and in our parents' lifetime, and will undoubtedly happen again. So we will see concentration of production with a lower number of farmers, whether we like it or whether we don't. Now we have a number of influential factors over that, such as maybe the price of land and the value of rental land. The price of land is very much driven by speculation and driven by the fact that it's a hedge against inflation and money is cheap, and that's a driver in that. The value of rental land then is driven by tax structures and people's need to get bigger faster. So we're looking at a lot of different changing dynamics. So into that then is what Amy talks about Brexit and how all these things, there are ongoing things we've been talking about those.
A lot of different changing dynamics. Throw into that then is what Eddie talks about, Brexit, CAP, all these things. They are ongoing things. We've been talking about those since way back to the 70s. Brexit is relatively new, but it's a problem that will come and will probably go just the same. They'll have to negotiate some kind of a deal to get food into Britain because they need the food. So we will be, farmers will be looking at the same ongoing problem that ever they've had. This more production, running faster.
Is that sustainable though?
Well, it has been sustainable in our lifetime, and since I've started farming and since I watched the takeover of my generation and then the coming takeover, you will see farmers becoming very wealthy and you will see farmers getting very poor. So it's hugely down to efficiency and scale and the ability to manage a business. And that has always been the case and will always been the case. And there are no real easy ways out of this thing, because we live in a very commercial world where farmers are presented with these dilemmas every day of the week, and we have ongoing things that farmers never had before. We have new positions to work now with the revenue commissioners, whereby we have to declare all wages before they're even paid. So there are extra complications being built into our life all the time. Now farmers need to be able to computerize. They need to be able to keep ahead of the game on all these things. And these are demanding things on people, who have a tradition of working with their hands and working with animals and doing all that. But now they have to upskill to a tremendous extent just to stay in the game. And I don't see any real change in that. I think that's the reality that faces every farmer, and it's something that we have to learn to live with and grow with.
John, on Brexit, we hear so much about the impact on the beef sector, but also the dairy sector will be hugely affected by it. How do you think it could potentially impact on milk price?
Oh, there's so many variables, Claire, that look at, we could be here for a long time, and it's all predicated on the future. But certainly there's no winners in Brexit. Brexit, to my mind, is economic disaster for all member states, but particularly pronounced in Ireland, and which is going to be a former member state, the UK. Now, whether the UK go for a deferral, whether Theresa May can get the Brexit package that I believe that she will conclude with Michel Barnier. I think there will be an agreement there, but then when she takes it back home to her own parliament, I think that's fraught. And there could potentially be a delay there. And that leaves us with a hiatus again. Nobody knows exactly when it's going to be impacting on the ground. But just particularly from the dairy perspective, it's going to be super difficult to replace the market, particularly for cheddar cheese. It's almost definitely going to have a negative unless global supplies dry up, which is potentially. I have the height of respect for Henry, but I don't fully agree with everything he said in the last statement. I think that's the point I was trying to make clearly here, Claire. What Henry said in a historical basis is true. Everybody keeps having to get bigger and bigger and bigger to stand still. I think it's up to leadership and people that advocate on behalf of farmers to explain to them that that doesn't have to be the case. That's in what they call a free market or a market-orientated situation. That's why I believe it's incumbent upon the Commission and the Commissioner, who happens to be Irish, but he's a European Commissioner, to put legislation, and it has to be legislation, in place that brings and redresses the imbalance that's there between the primary producer and the multinationals. Because that's where the fault is. Because you can never, ever, ever, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, produce for a market with a product that has a 3-year lead in. And that's why agriculture stands out from any other product in the world. Is that by the time we put our animals into the crush to make a decision what AI start to inseminate them, 9 months for the gestation, 2.5 years for them to come back into the milking parlour. So if the Commissioner or any other politician can tell me where the market is going to be in 3 years' time, I'll produce, and my colleagues will produce for that market. So that's why we've got to have policies, and we've got to have legislation that will stop what Henry is absolutely right about is we have to keep producing more to stand still. But that's because the multinationals are taking more and more of a margin every year. The primary producer is taking less and less of the final retail price year on year since 1970. We're getting less of the final price of the litre of milk, and we're certainly getting less of the final price of the kilo of beef. And why is that? There's only two people, I believe, in the food chain that can be exploited: the primary producer and the consumer. Because the primary producer is a price taker, the consumer is a price giver, everybody else in between. And this is not a criticism of everybody else, because this is the way business works. But everybody else in between will take a margin. Nestle said clearly to their shareholders, they made them a promise: we're going to grow our margin up to 20%. Doesn't matter if the producer has to take less or the consumer has to pay more, we're going to do that. So that's why, even at national level, with multinationals that have such serious turnovers, even a member state like Ireland cannot do that alone. So that's why we need European legislation. It has to be strong legislation, it has to be robust, it has to be fit for purpose, and it has the only thing that can deliver for the primary producer.
And John, Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Development, Phil Hogan, has put forward his proposal on unfair trading practices. Do you think that will go some way to address that, or?
Well, Claire, without being too facetious, it might go from me to you, that distance, that kind of distance, when it needs to go from here to Dublin. It's a baby step, and it's more a trip forward. Well-intentioned, but certainly not near strong enough for what I would have in mind, or what I would have envisaged is necessary to deal with what has been happening for generations. So, what I'm saying is, since the inception of the European Union, people have been talking about it. There has been voluntary codes of practice, there has been so on and so forth, but nothing has changed. So if you keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, then you're knocking at the wrong door. So I have to commend Commissioner Hogan. I've had a lot of lobbying sessions with the Commissioner when I was President for ICMSA. We got in the voluntary milk reduction scheme, which I think was an enormous success at a time of a major crisis for primary producers. It was something different, and here's the thing, it actually worked. It took 1.1 billion tonnes of product off the marketplace that would otherwise have been produced and even flooded the market further. I think the rationale there has been slightly lost since, and the member states, and I appreciate the difficulty that a commissioner has, because you've got to get all the other member states on side, and you've got to get the power brokers in Europe, like the Germans and the French, and so on. And there's another problem going forward as well, Claire, is, you know, there's member states reluctant to put in money into the budget, like Austria and Sweden and even the Netherlands.
22 of the 27.
Yeah, they're not as committed as they once used to be. But we have to keep ploughing on in terms of explaining Europe to the citizens and telling them, because a lot of the money that's put through these processes down to is taxpayers' money. And it's got to be justified, and they have to feel that they're getting good value for the money. And I think if it was properly explained that they certainly are getting excellent value for the money. But the primary one for me going forward is certainly to redress the imbalance in the food supply chain, because I think they're taking too big of a margin at the expense of the primary producer.
And finally, Eddie, just on the situation with the beef sector, you've Brexit, we've the reform of the common agricultural policy. There is lots of lobbying being done by the farm organisations to bring in extra support, seen as the government will have the autonomy to create different schemes to protect whatever areas are needed. What supports would you like to, do you think need to be brought in to protect the beef sector?
You know, I think the beef sector is particularly vulnerable when you look at Brexit and the fact that we're supplying so much of our beef into the UK market, and it's critical that a good result is got from that. I'd agree with John here. I think that the Chequers agreement that has come forward, by Theresa May is putting forward now, will go some way to bringing Europe to agreeing with together as on a UK European position. I'm not so sure that the British Parliament will accept that when they get that back. That's a big problem for us. If we don't get that, our beef industry is in real trouble. I'm heartened from the fact that our beef factories actually have plants in the UK and strategically placed in the UK to help us to get into that European or the UK market after Brexit. That could be critically important for us as we go forward. Subsidisation and how do we subsidise the beef sector? I think very clearly we've got to look at it on a manner on which we can drive efficiencies within the industry. It's not just good enough to say I want, as we're 200 euros per suckler cow. I think that's wrong. I think that's the wrong comment to make. I think what we should be looking for here is a structured system which gives us extra output from that sector and more efficiencies within it. And I think that has to be challenged and done on that basis. I wouldn't give a payment on a suckler cow. I give it on a calf. I give it on output from that cow, not on just having an animal that doesn't produce or is non-productive within the system, which is, you know, we need, that needs to be tailored. There's a lot of areas there that the beef industry needs to grow efficiencies within and needs to get better at what it does. And it's going to be very, very difficult for the beef sector to compete with a vibrant dairy sector which is driving forward. The competition now for good land is between tillage farmers and dairy farmers. If we get good weather for the tillage farmer, for the suckler farmer and the beef farmer seems to be slipping back on that. And to be efficient then on poor quality land is going to be difficult. But I like the schemes which have got a lot of bad press over the last period of time. The genomic scheme, I actually think that is the route forward. If the dairy sector hadn't engaged with EBI, if the pig sector and the poultry sector, which Henry talked about a few minutes, hadn't engaged with genomics over the last 20, 30 years, they would be totally inefficient and out of business in this country at this stage. If the beef sector does not engage with genomics and doesn't stand up, and there's a leadership needs to be shown here, that the route forward here is efficiencies, and genomics is part and parcel of that. Now that's a two-way thing. It's not just saying the farmers have to come forward, but the industry, the ICBF, everybody, all the parties to that game have got to come onto the pitch here and make a system that works for the beef sector, because the current system is so unpredictable that farmers are losing faith in it, and we need to bring them back to it very fast, because it is the future, it is the way forward, and support mechanisms that support systems like that and output from farms and efficient systems, I think that's the way forward.
I'll have to stop it there, unfortunately. We're way over time, but I'm glad the tent actually stayed intact for that. But thank you very much for joining us today. And next we're off to the FDD tent where celebrity chef Catherine Fulvio is giving a demonstration.